Oklahoma was one of the leading states in terms of aviation.
Oklahoma is also a state that welcomes our military. It is our duty to provide new capabilities, new knowledge, new innovations, new technologies.
We want to do activities in the classroom, after school, and during school because students already know what a dentist is and a doctor is, but they may not know what an engineer is.
Ambition is the definition of space. It's the definition of being human. If we stop exploring, we stop being human. I mean, we are Oklahoma. We've been through many things, and without ambition, drive, and courage, what else would we have out there?
There's a saying in the aviation business. Insiders say planes are built all over, but they're repaired in Oklahoma. The state has had a recent upswing in the maintenance, repair, and overhaul industry, but its roots in aviation history span back a century.
It's been a couple of really strange years.
Very strange.
I mean, we had the Thunder game really was kind of the precipitous start to the beginning of COVID.
Yeah.
And then that next week was just, we all went home. You went home. And here we are 2.5 years later. And I mean, obviously we had a big issue, but I think we're on the right trajectory, moving up and succeeding, at least in aviation aerospace. Flights are coming back. Companies are still coming to Oklahoma. Your phone's still ringing off the hook.
This is yours, sir.
I think one of the really good things about our aerospace industry, one, the number of businesses. We have over 1,300 businesses that are in the aerospace industry.
Oklahoma was one of the leading states in terms of aviation for one simple reason, other than the pioneering spirit and opportunity and hard times and all of that.
There always seems to be a need for workforce. We have something that's always good. We have big government employers in aerospace and aviation. Monroney Aeronautical Center, FAA, that is the central nervous system for our nation's air transportation system. The reason our aerospace industry is growing, one of the big reasons, we have a very positive public policy in the state toward aerospace and aviation. It is a bipartisan issue. There's no red, yellow, blue, green. It's everybody wants to support aviation and aerospace.
Well, I know that there was many aerospace companies that stayed open during those first 2 weeks of the shutdown. AAR Corporation was one of those. I know United Dynamics stayed open because they deemed themselves essential personnel, and then later they were declared essential personnel. Yeah. And I think those are scary times when you don't know what's happening in the country, right. and to come to work because aviation is essential, I think.
Yeah.
We're probably a little bit less busy than we were before pandemic, but the things that have changed is we're not working on the smaller CRJ airplanes that we used to. The market has grown for the bigger airplanes, the 737s, the E-175s. Those kind of airplanes have kind of taken over the market. So we're still busy. We haven't grown back to the man hours that we used to before pandemic, but that's strictly because of the airplane types we're working on.
Early aviators were drawn to Oklahoma for its wide open spaces and abundance of talent and resources. Cart builders turning their hand to crafting primitive wooden assemblies for the fledgling aircraft manufacturers of the earliest part of the 20th century. It was world conflict, though, that brought the first turning point for the aviation industry in the Sooner State.
During World War I, the Army Air Corps, there was no Air Force at the time, the Army Air Corps was using aircraft to spot for the artillery. Well, the artillery headquarters for the entire U.S. Army was in Oklahoma at Fort Sill.
This country seems to have been laid out perfectly for testing the trucks that move the Army. Guns, ammunition, men and machines, everything rolls on wheels. It takes a lot of power to pull up these hills and the best of brakes to get back down.
Established 1869, had survived, was reiterated for each time of war. And during World War I, they said this is going to be where we will headquarter the Army Air Corps. So here come all the airplanes, here come the mechanics, here come the designers, here come the pilots, and the people who say, yeah, I'm crazy enough to get up in this this little canvas-covered aircraft and spot for the artillery. So this became a center of aviation.
In that post-war aviation boom, and just 20 years after the Wright brothers first took to the air, Oklahoma launched its own airmail service, connecting the then distant cities of Tulsa and Oklahoma. By 1926, Paul and Tom Braniff were mirroring that route with passengers as Oklahoma's first airline, a company that would in due course find itself operating Concorde 50 years later.
And once the war ended, you have all these airplanes that have been here for training, and they're scattered out into the population. So these crazy Oklahoma kids who knew no limits and had this courage in dealing with tough times, bad weather, tornadoes, drought, depression, all the conflicts of our history, say, hey, yeah, I'm willing to do that.
You know, we persevered, we survived. We've always been in Oklahoma, we've been a tough people. You know, you look at all the different things from the Dust Bowl to the oil and gas bust, but we've always been able to come out of the other side of whatever strife we were experiencing in Oklahoma for the better. And I think aviation, aerospace, and COVID, we're doing the same thing. Whether it's commerce, recruiting companies, whether it's airports doing projects, whether it's creating the next generation of pilots, or working on that new technology. You know, you hear about that Oklahoma standard. I think we've just kind of risen up as a collective in the aviation aerospace industry and said, hey, we're going to keep marching on. We're not going to stand back and just keep it at average or keep it at level, even keel. We want to keep going up and up and up. And I'm sure you guys experience that every day in commerce as well.
In the 1920s, the Spartan College began a formal pilot training program, and the fledgling Aeronautics Commission issued its first state-approved pilot's license in 1931. Few observers of the time could have anticipated that the barnstormers in their ex-Army planes would become respected aviators.
Young men like Wiley Post, the son of sharecroppers in southern Oklahoma, gets a chance to buy an airplane after he's injured in the oil patch, loses an eye, despite the lack of depth perception, gets a little Jenny, learns how to fly.
Well, so long, I'll see you in about 6 days.
Fortunately for him, he's doing that just as oil companies are being founded in Oklahoma. Oklahoma and Texas would swap leading state in oil production from 1905 through the 1930s. And the oil companies developing aviation fuel for this growing new industry in the 20s and 30s want to promote in a time before radio or television. So they want to promote their aviation fuel by sponsoring these crazy pilots who will go higher, farther, faster, winning races. And it happens. Frank Phillips of Phillips Petroleum sponsors an aircraft in the Dole race from Hawaii to LA, and they win. Wiley Post gets a sponsor out of Chickasha, a little town in southwestern Oklahoma, and suddenly he's got this hot rod airplane, and he is going high, so high in the altitude that he starts passing out. He said, wait a minute, I got to do something if I'm going to go higher. He develops the first pressurized suit in the world. The original is now in the Smithsonian. But Wiley Post figures out how to do this limited pressurization before you can pressurize a cabin, because the technology would not allow it. Allows him to go even higher, discovers the stratosphere, discovers the jet stream, and what that can do for aviators. And then once he gets his Lockheed Vega, the hot rod of airplanes, in 1931, he's the first to go around the world as a pilot. 1933, does it solo and beats his record when he had a co-pilot, a navigator at the time. It's a one-eyed sharecropper's son who does all of this. All of these elements come together. Fort Sill is part of the story. The oil patch is part of the story. This pioneer spirit of Oklahomans is part of the story. And so Oklahoma becomes a center of aviation by the 1930s because of all of these trends in our history.
1932 marked another milestone as Thomas Allen and James Banning became the first African Americans to cross a continent rife with division and racial prejudice. Just 3 years later, though, the state suffered its first real setback as record breaker and innovator Wiley Post and Will Rogers, film star, comedian and columnist, perished in an amphibian crash. The pair are, of course, commemorated in the naming of the two major airports in Oklahoma City. Tulsa had operated a major airport since 1929, and across the state, smaller cities and towns soon followed suit.
So it's been a fixture in our community for nearly 100 years, and it's home to about 13,000 employees, and we have about 3 million passengers that travel through every year. And it's a pretty exciting time to be in aviation in Tulsa. You know, a recent study said we're the second largest industry and the fastest growing industry, and with a little hiccup because of COVID, we're starting to see that activity pick back up. Our role is just really to be supportive of our tenants and our partners. We have a lot of DoD work that takes place on the airport, so my role is to make sure that those executives of those companies and those employees really have the support they need to be able to do their job, sustain their current development needs, but then also assist them as they look for opportunities to grow.
In 1940, war is raging in Europe. The Japanese Imperial Navy and Army are expanding. They're already in China, Manchuria, Korea. Franklin Roosevelt understood the threat was coming. How do we prepare in the country where Congress is still dominated by isolationists who say we don't want anything to do with these foreign wars? He knew it was coming. He knew that he needed to be part of protecting democracy in the world from the Nazis, the Imperial Japanese. And so he puts together a civilian group outside of the military departments, which are confined by congressional action. A man named William Knutson, who had made Chevrolet Motors the #1 motor company in the country, had surpassed Ford by years. Knutson is pulled into this war production office on the civilian side to put together a network of industrialists around the country. How do we prepare? Where are the machine shops? Where can we get the raw materials? Where are we going to find the engineers? Where are we going to find the skilled labor force to put together the material needed to fight a war? The aircraft, the tanks, the landing craft, all of this. Well, Knutson knew a man in Oklahoma City who had started a Ford dealership in 1920 named Fred Jones. So Fred Jones is a friend of Knutson. Knutson says, Fred, I need you in Washington, D.C., $1 a year, man. I need you to just give up your pay, and for $1, we're going to pay you to spend a year to help us prepare for war when the military and Congress won't do it. So Fred drops everything, leaves his businesses to his associates, goes to Washington, and is doing surveys. Where in the Southwest are we going to find those machine workers, the metal shops, the materials? They start doing surveys. Where can we find the different parts to put together a war machine before there is war? So fortunately for us, he knows about Tulsa and the machine workers there, the industrialization that happened because of the oil patch, starting in Tulsa in 1905 with the Glenpool oil field, and then expanding. One of the world's largest refineries was built in Tulsa, covered an entire square mile by 1910. And so here you have these industrial workers, you have these people who know how to work with metal and with their hands, and a labor pool of people leaving the small farms of Oklahoma when farming is failing in the 1930s. And so he knows about all this and makes a case with Washington officials. Oklahoma is a place you're going to find the parts to prepare this country for war. And so war comes. And it's spreading around the world, and we're getting closer and closer all the time. The Douglas Aircraft Company needs a place to assemble aircraft. The first one they design in the Southwest comes to Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Scenes like these at the Douglas factory are duplicated in many other plants.
And two of the people working on that plant, one is an architect, one is an engineer. The architect is Truett Cosden, who a trained architect, an artist by avocation, who is this incredible creator, designer, who can work with others. And then an engineer on the same team, Wally Frankfurt. And even though they didn't know anything in Tulsa, by the time that the war is coming, and they say, yes, we are, and we need more, is that they take the same plans for that bomber plant in Tulsa and say, we're going to build the same plant in Oklahoma City. By this time, Fred Jones, Oklahoma City Chamber of Commerce, state officials, our congressional delegation have gone to the Army Air Corps and say, if you need a depot somewhere in the Midwest, some place to store parts, to train pilots, to train crews on how to maintain aircraft, no matter where it might be in the entire world, we have over 300 days of blue sky. We have flat, open space, lots of land that we can purchase for you. We have the industrial infrastructure to support it with rail lines, with gas and electricity, all this oil and gas in Oklahoma, the power to generate. All of this is coming together, and the Army Air Corps says, we will build our Midwest Air Depot in Oklahoma City. And the leaders in Oklahoma City purchase the land, build the infrastructure a little bit southeast of town. That plant is later renamed for an Osage general who dies leading an attack on Japan in 1942 named Clarence Tinker. Tinker Air Force Base becomes part of the landscape, part of the defense infrastructure on preparing this country for war. The Douglas Bomber Plant is built next to it, a building that's almost a mile long. And here are two young people, two young men, Truett Cosden, Wally Frankfurt, who are part of that.
The end of the war came. There was no longer any need for their services with the Austin Company. They were both laid off, but they liked Oklahoma City. They were originally from other parts of the nation, and they found a home here for a few years working for the Austin Company. And so when they were laid off, they said, we like Oklahoma City, let's just start our own practice here. So Truett Cosden, being an architect, and Wally Frankfurt, being an electrical engineer, they formed a company. And then just a few weeks later, a gentleman named Harold Short, who they knew previously from their work with the Austin Company, rolled into their office and was also looking for work. And so they said, well, why don't we make this a threesome and bring you on? And so that's the start of Cosden, Frankfurt, Short. Commercial aviation is obviously a big part of our work here at FSB, and it all started back in the 1950s when we designed some air-conditioned buildings for American Airlines at their aircraft maintenance base in Tulsa, Oklahoma. That got our foot in the door with American Airlines. About a few years later, the jet engine came into play with commercial airliners with the Boeing 707.
American Airlines' operational hub is, of course, located in Oklahoma's southern neighbor, Texas. But in 1946, the fledgling airline, which still flies a commemorative DC-3 aircraft from the period, relocated its maintenance from New York to Tulsa, where it's been ever since, operating what is now the world's largest airline-owned repair and overhaul facility.
And so American called upon us to design some engine test cells for them at American in Tulsa, and also some overhaul facilities where they take the parts and pieces off these aircraft and do the required maintenance on them. And so we got in step with American Airlines back in the 50s, and I can truthfully say that we are continuing to work for them today and have continuously worked for them for what, now 6 or 7 decades of our history.
We need new talent to come into our industry, help them see the exciting career that is an aviation maintenance technician.
The skills that technicians need are the ability to analyze something and really look at it and test it before we sign it off. Because we do a job right the first time, always.
The most important skill for an AMT is perfection. There's no room for error, and when that airplane takes off and lands without incident, then we've done what we set out to do.
The responsibility that we have, knowing that after we repair it, the airplane's gonna fly with somebody's family member on it. That brings excitement to the responsibility of our job.
We make up 2% of the population in aircraft maintenance, and it's nice to see women doing work side by side by the men.
If you like putting puzzles together, you'll like this job.
I like the technical stuff. I like troubleshooting, problem solving, working with other mechanics or engineers on trying to resolve an issue.
Working on an airplane, every day is different. Everything's new, everything's a challenge.
My father was an aircraft mechanic with U.S. Air. Actually, he started with Allegheny Airlines back in the late 1950s, and it's been in the family.
Our diligence never wavers. It doesn't matter if it's a reading light or an engine change. American technicians are the best in the industry.
A lot of people think that anybody can just show up and do the job, like working on cars. We're licensed by the FAA, and there's a lot more to it than just coming in and changing parts.
If you're out here walking the base, you start to see that these guys are pretty sharp. They love what they do. They're very good at what they do. They take it pretty seriously.
Part of what we've done too as an organization, organizations working together, is that we've really started working with our industry much closer and much more consistently too. They hear from us, they come, and when they are struggling or when they are having issues, they're reaching out to us, and so we can respond to them. We started supply chain portals so that we can enhance our supply chains, not only for people looking outside in what kind of supply chain assets do you have, but even across the state. Gosh, there's so many instances now of people that were ordering stuff from other places, and yet their neighbors do that kind of work. And so, the supply chain portals, the contract support that we've been able to provide to companies too. So I think that they feel more confident because we've not really had an association per se that's lasted any length of time, but that yet now they have contacts and they have names and they know that they can call and reach us.
Right.
And I think that's important.
Yeah, what was that one story of the company that was buying some piece of supply or something like that halfway around the globe and realized it was being made 10, 15 miles down the road here in Oklahoma.
Right.
Yep.
So,
I love it. I love it.
The lower price and, just shipping in general.
Time.
Yeah, so, but I just think that everybody in the state too, and when we bring people here, I don't think that, I do. I think that the majority of the reason why people really feel comfortable and welcome here is because of all the people we bring to the table, and we work together. We try and provide them as much ease of access to whether it's OAC, OCAST, OMA, and all those are just acronyms, but the universities, career tech, we try and bring everybody to the table so that they can have the best experience while they're here. And not only do they get it while they're just visiting, but once they land here also, they get it all the time.
Yeah.
Well, here in Oklahoma City, the Douglas plant just becomes part of the Tinker Air Force Base and expands, but allows Tinker to not just survive for a few years and then go away, as most bases would do after the war. It finds this new capability of maintaining B-1 bombers, of maintaining aircraft, the AWACS, going on with naval based aircraft.
Yes, Tinker is the big dog, or one of the big dogs as we like to call it. So as an industrial plant, it's huge, it's mammoth. But in addition to that, of course, there are extensive program management capabilities. It's the headquarters, the hub, if you will, of the Air Force Supply Chain Management Program. And so there really anything that has to do with Air Force logistics in one way, shape, or form, comes through Tinker, or certainly is touched by Tinker Air Force Base.
In 2012, I was fortunate to be the Director of Logistics for Air Force Materiel Command up in Ohio. And at that time, we redesignated 12 of our centers down to 5 and established Tinker as the headquarters for the Sustainment Command. So although Tinker has its own depot, it's also the headquarters for all of the depots for the Air Force. Robins Air Force Base, Hill Air Force Base, and Tinker. And yet again, it also has responsibility for all of the supply chain functions for the Air Force. So it is clearly the most important central base for sustainment. I was here in the early 90s when there were 5 depots across the Air Force. And you may recall the base realignment and closure committees. And so Congress was looking at which bases to close. Fortunately, Tinker was not one of those. And I think one of the incredible features was how not only do the civilian contractors, but the civic leaders rally around Tinker.
Many airports had observation areas at one point in time. And many people probably have a story about when they were a young child and going to the airport to watch airplanes. I was one of those people. But of course, since 9/11, those things have changed. And so what I think makes this project really unique, there were a number of elements to it, but this is really one of the primary elements, is an observation area that they don't have to go through security, and they can come up here and see the beautiful airfield and see the airplanes coming and going. It really harkens back to what airports used to have. And in the age of post 9/11, this is a wonderful feature for this project. As everyone who is in aviation knows and experiences, it's a resilient industry, and I think everyone still thinks that's the case. And really, the project was solving a number of issues. One was long-term congestion at the checkpoint, which this project definitely addresses. It also plans for the future in that the lower level of this project has space for a future customs and border protection. So we would be able to screen international passengers flying into OKC. And space for more amenities. And you know, this type of project is a community project. It's more than an airport project. We have aerospace companies and MRO companies, maintenance, repair, and overhaul companies, that are here because of our location. Because you're right in the middle of both coasts. And so it makes a lot of sense to maintain airplanes in this region, because you can cover all four corners of the continental US. Adequate runway space, we've got ramp space, gate space, and boarding bridge, and there's still a couple steps that need to happen, but we feel we're a growing community and a growing state, and you know, I think our opportunities probably initially are to Central and South America, but ultimately we feel we'd have opportunities elsewhere too.
The new regional airline rights, we may have to go look and see if our certificates are still in good check, because you know there is some very renewed interest in the commercial airline world with some of the rates that were just announced this past week.
I'm telling you,
first year salary of like $90,000, right seat to regional.
I know we're doing God's work right now, but it might be time for us to go do our work. I had that conversation with Mrs. Camp this week, and she's like, "Is it time?" And I was like,
The Spartan Pilots College that sprung up after the First World War is still going strong today. It's evolved beyond all recognition and has proved the catalyst for a whole host of educational facilities in the state.
We have Spartan College of Aeronautics, which has been in our community for 93 years, Tulsa Technology Center, Tulsa Community College, Oklahoma State University. So many training resources for the companies that are here today. And then they partner with these educational institutions to develop training courses that are specific to their needs. And it's just a great resource. Workforce training is very accessible in our community. The people who work here just are truly committed to the mission of their organization. They give it their all, they're fully invested, and the work ethic is really what sets us apart from other locations in the country. When the state of Oklahoma decided to really focus on aviation and aerospace development by forming the ACES group, that just provided another resource to help us with our success. And so we use them as a resource when we're looking at trends and incentives and just overall needs. And then they come to us to provide us with opportunities.
And one of my goals is to start hitting kids in the elementary school starting at probably 4th grade. And then we just hit them with stuff basic. You know, take an airplane in there and say, this is what happens when you do this, and this is what happens when you do this. And then hit them again in junior high. And then by the time they're in high school, maybe they're seeing, hey, there's an opportunity here. And there's an opportunity to be a part of aerospace and aviation, good paying job, steady income, a way to take care of your family, and still be involved in something that's so critical to our nation.
So the Oklahoma Aeronautics Commission, we are the state's aviation aerospace agency. We have this great program called ACES over in the Department of Commerce. The Aerospace Commerce Economic Services, us and Commerce partner together to put on the ACES program to really be that linchpin, that support for the industry to make sure that one, the industry has what it needs, that we can recruit new industry, that we can increase the presence of the current industry we have right here in our state.
So ACES stands for the Aerospace Commerce and Economic Services. It was actually a piece of legislation that was passed in 2018 by the Oklahoma State Legislature. And that was Oklahoma's way to signify that they are, as a state, putting their money where their mouth is in terms of being serious about growing the aerospace and defense industry. Basically, our job is day in and day out is to help grow and promote the aerospace and defense industry in the state. We do that by recruiting new companies, expanding existing companies, remove barriers to business for our existing aerospace businesses. Also, we try to help our state businesses retain more of the U.S. Air Force Tinker DoD spend coming out the gate.
At the Commission, we have for several years, we have offered a grant program to schools and to teachers to allow them to build quality aviation programming as low as pre-kindergarten up to 12th grade. So we will continue to offer these grant programs to schools.
The ACES 10-year plan, in one word or one phrase, is all of the above. We are very strong with MRO. And at the risk of sounding boastful, we could do MRO with our eyes closed. It's in our DNA, it's in our heritage, our blood. We'll continue to do MRO and support that industry and grow it as much as possible. We're very aggressive. We have strong suits. We have connectivity. We have first, second, third, and even fourth tier suppliers. We continually survey the landscape of our ecosystem and identify gaps and fill those gaps. That's strategic hunting. But we also recognize that advancement of aviation and aerospace, we understand that vehicle that's flying in the sky is going under a lot of changes. So we're chasing battery technology, electric flight technology, additive technology, autonomous technology. We're doing all of those things to ensure that not only does our workforce have a job for the next 10 years, but our children and our grandchildren have a long and healthy career or job opportunity in front of them in Oklahoma.
It was very busy for an MRO Europe show, and it was in October of 21, and I thought it was interesting too because of there was still a lot of mask mandates, but once you got into the show, everybody was like, no way. And then of course, I mean, they, just like a lot of the America's MRO shows, once they started happy hour, there was absolutely no masks. And there was a lot of happy hours going on because everybody was so anxious to be out and about.
No one had any happy hour.
I know, everybody was so anxious to be out again. But there was large representation. Most of the bigs were back again because a lot of the bigs didn't attend MRO Americas in the spring because they didn't have that the ability to travel yet or to do shows, and so there was a whole lot of people out and about. And of course, we brought 4 companies with us, and we're looking at obviously doing that again this year. Not only MRO Europe, but also the Farnborough. We've got 11 companies going with us to Farnborough. So people are ready to travel, to do business, to do person-to-person business, make connections.
I think that, unfortunately, in many cases, this industry has been male-dominated. And I think that I don't think that that's necessarily required. I think that I served with women in the Navy that were great mechanics, great pilots, and I think that we need to let everyone understand that aviation is open for business for everyone.
I don't think there's anything we can do that's more important than ensure that we have the workforce we need today and tomorrow for our aviation aerospace businesses. If we don't have that, that's the lifeblood of the industry, like any other industry. But we've got to get people to once again think it's cool to be in aviation and aerospace.
So we are an MRO state, which is maintenance, repair, and overhaul. If there is one thing that I wish we can dig our hands into, is become a production state also. We're not just doing maintenance, but producing things for aerospace and aviation. I think we have the capability, I think we have the space, and I think we have the people that can do it. So I would love to see us get an opportunity to start building things here and not just fixing them.
But we've been around for a while. We've been around since 1946. Our predecessor, the Oklahoma Aviation Commission, started in 1946. 1963 became the Oklahoma Aeronautics Commission, and we've been doing business as the Oklahoma Aeronautics Commission since then. We really have 4 main pillars 4 main areas that we focus on at OAC. The first is obvious. That's our airport system. We have a wonderful system of airports across the state. We've got 4 beautiful commercial airports that people can fly out of on a commercial airliner. We also have 104 general aviation or municipal regional airports that support our towns and communities all across our great state. The goal is to ensure that this industry that's so near and dear to our hearts becomes the state's #1 industry in the future. We want to help the state diversify its economy to ensure the greater economic success for our state and for the citizens of Oklahoma.
But we are also working with a new high school aviation curriculum that's been developed by the AOPA, the Aircraft Owners Pilots Association. And we are working to make sure that Oklahoma schools have knowledge about this new curriculum, which is free. It's free to schools. It is a 4-year pathway of coursework, 9 through 12, that allows students to actually learn to fly, to become pilots. It is also a pathway offered to schools for drones, for unmanned aircraft systems. If you stand and have the opportunity to watch them in the aviation lab experiences that they've had and see the hands-on work that they're doing and how confident they are, they realize that they can enter the workforce, and that's what's exciting for me. It's extremely important that our young women who are so bright and so capable begin to understand that they can do anything that they want to do. And in my former role with the Ada City School District, we tried to make sure, particularly at the 7th and 8th grade, even younger, but particularly in the 7th and 8th grade level, we invited them to the Women in Aviation Luncheon. We let them be immersed in experiences where they saw high-performing women in aerospace and aviation careers. One Saturday I was sitting here at the airport and there was no one here. I was out on the steps by myself, and a plane landed, and I saw that it was a young lady that was in our program. And she pulled up, and there was no one in the plane with her, and she pulled up on the ramp and got out of the airplane. And I said, "Hannah, where have you been?" And she said, I flew to Durant, then I flew to McAllister, and then I flew to Ada. And I said, "By yourself?" And she said, "Yep." And tears were in my eyes because I started with her in 9th grade, a little girl that would not even look you straight in the eye or talk to you, who was now confident enough to fly by herself.
Before the curriculum, I didn't know how to work this. First time I flew, I crashed immediately. But because of this curriculum, I got the scholarship that allowed me to take my flight training. And so now I know exactly what I'm doing. Plus in the curriculum, we did learn about the controls of the airplane. So that really helped me know what I'm doing. It's helping me learn more things about it so I can hopefully be a better teacher and teach what I've learned to other people. And with the flight hours, it really helps with the myelination. So repetition is really helping with everything. Right now, this year we've learned about the markings and signs in an airport. We've learned about weather and how to adapt to the weather for aviation. And currently we are learning about how to properly set up a nav log, which is really helpful for plotting a course.
We've had this year, at the end of the culmination of the pathway, about 6 kids that I've had the opportunity to actually drive to the testing center to take their written pilot's examination. And to watch them come out of the room and be successful and pass that written exam before they even graduated from high school and had a diploma was extremely gratifying for me because of the work that we had boots on the ground to build this program for 4 years, and to see them be successful, it was extremely exciting. And I guess even more than that is the fact that many of these kids would not have been given this opportunity were it not for the people in this community.
At this point in time, we don't know what the final number is yet, but to give you a little inside scoop inside the sky of what AOPA is doing,
we're looking at about 55 schools that are going to teach this curriculum next year. So we've gone from one school teaching it in 2017-2018 school year to potentially 55 schools teaching that in 2022-2023 school year. So we've gone from 1 to 55. It's absolutely amazing how gangbusters has gone in the state of Oklahoma. All thanks to, mostly have to give thanks to Paula Keedy and her work for the agency and what she's been able to do. You talk about taking 12,000 miles on the car in the summer of 2020. We had to get her own car because she was putting 20 and 25,000 miles is what we were projecting on the amount of schools that she was going to go hit. We might be better off getting her pilot's license than getting her an airplane and say, here, go. There's only so many hours in the day you can meet with educators. So it's interesting where we've come from on the AOPA curriculum.
And launched a dedicated high school here in the metro.
Norman,
Oklahoma Aviation Academy.
Norman's doing its own high school like the Raisbeck School of Seattle.
We made it work because of the citizens of Ada, Oklahoma. And now the commission has given me the exciting opportunity to share that work with other schools and other communities in Oklahoma that have the capability. There are 108 airports in Oklahoma that can work with schools just like the Ada Regional Airport did with the Ada City School District. And so for me, it has been a remarkable journey. It's been a pathway for me just as much as it has been a pathway for the students. And I think that they've seen that. Many of them, every time they see me, how is it? How's your new role? They're excited that they've been a part of it, and I am too.
And there we go. Thank you.
You know, it's funny, Paula tells this story about Hannah, and that she took off from the Ada airport and they're watching her on FlightAware, and she's just doing circles over this rural community, and they're worried sick about her. They're thinking something's wrong. Real low in the plane, and she lands. Hannah, what were you doing? I was flying over my grandma's house.
Well, of course you would.
Of course you were.
Of course, Who wouldn't want to fly over their grandma's house?
Yeah, you told your grandma you'd do that. By goodness, you are.
Check that box.
Yeah, it's a testament, though. Like, you know, catching fire. This past year, all the work we've done for workforce. I mean, it's so very important. You know, and I know you guys Paula specifically, rolling up her sleeves and getting after it. But you touched on something earlier, Sandra. You were talking about women in aviation, how special that was very special for me personally. I took my oldest daughter, to that one, and we were up front and got to see all the events up close and personal. I've literally just come back from Stillwater for orientation, where she's in flight school now. So I love watching the next generation catch fire. Yeah. And this is not a platform, but it really makes me happy to see more women pick up wrenches and knee boards and get after it. Yeah. They get after it. I love it.
One thing we didn't mention was, in the midst of all of this pandemic, the video, we came into existence in our roles.
Yeah.
I mean, you started 2 weeks before COVID happened. I took the helm from Vic as the head of the agency in November of 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic. Yeah. And so, I mean, you talk about change. There's been some significant change in Oklahoma's aviation and aerospace.
We're in the middle of a thunderstorm and swapped out the air crew.
And so all of a sudden, you know, the two stalwarts of the industry that have been doing this for, you know, decades and years, decided to go pull the parachute and jump out the back of the airplane, and now we're trying to figure out how to fly the thing while it's in the air. And I say that in jest because they duly reserve their retirements and their experiences in being able to call it quits.
Yeah.
But it's been an interesting challenge nonetheless while we also navigate the pandemic, we're trying to navigate ourselves and our own organizations too. So it's been I will say it's been a fun ride, but it's darn sure been an interesting ride too.
Man, any landing you walk away from is still a landing.
Wait, have we landed yet? Are we not flying yet? We landed?
I don't think there's been any of the houses are getting bigger.
Yeah.
Whoa. No, I don't think we've had any of those.
Yeah, we haven't had
yet.
any of those yet. You know, you got to keep the blue sky on top
Yeah,
and the green
yeah.
stuff on bottom, and
Keep
you're all
the blue
right.
up. Yep, keep the blue up.
We feel that it's incumbent upon public universities in the United States to use their research capability, their enterprise, their ability to create new technologies to help advance solutions that will help our national security, that will help our defense, that will help our warfighters provide stronger capabilities to really tackle the challenges that we face from our adversaries.
Many faculty, to my delight, have really bought into this concept for producing research that can be applied to these difficult problems.
We had the adversary in the rear view mirror, that we could see the adversary. I think today the adversary in some of these areas has passed us. Okay, it's ahead, areas like hypersonics and others, which are really critical to the future stability of the planet. And so we find ourselves today in a place where we still have the technology capability that is unparalleled in the world. It is, the adversaries are reaching the point of parity with us. And that's concerning. That's why we have to innovate faster than ever. Okay? Innovation technology happens at the global scale today. There's no turning that clock back.
But many of our research projects include students, both undergraduate students and graduate students in particular, in the research activities. So you'll find across a variety of projects, engineers from various colleges, and not just engineers, but other researchers from other colleges outside the College of Engineering who are participants, active participants in various research projects, be they for the government or for private industry, private companies.
But now we're turning that and we're using those technologies that we have created, those new innovations, and getting a very strong demand signal from our military friends who want to see how we might apply those new technologies for security and for detecting potential attacks by the adversary.
Yeah, so our weather radar program has been about over 50 years here, and is based on a foundational relationship with NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and it was all about severe weather observations. And so about 15 to 20 years ago, we started looking at defense applications for some of the more advanced radars that we've developed. And we found that there's a beautiful synergy between some of our weather radar technology and defense applications. It turns out we do a lot of great radar technology, but what industry and I think what the state needs almost more than anything else is the production of students that have hands-on experience with the kind of equipment that we have here in this lab.
We are a recipient of one of the largest Department of Defense STEM grants, and so we're able to use these monies to help encourage engineers from actually kindergarten, all the way to 12th grade, and let them know that engineering is everywhere. And so we want to make sure that we can help with defense careers and aerospace and those type of careers, and let little students and through K through 12 know that engineering is everywhere. Well, we're going to make sure that we have our engineering students, our current engineering students, male and female, and all demographic areas that are going to be the students as part of our team, because we want the students and the little students to know, that the students in school to know that they have role models and people that look like them, even at the college age, and engineers and professionals out in the field. We need more engineers, absolutely, with the workforce development. I mean, we cannot graduate enough engineers to fulfill all the jobs here at Tinker Air Force Base and beyond throughout all the DoD. Actually, someone that's working in the background here was one of my students when I was an academic advisor in engineering over 15, 20 years ago. So it's nice to see that they finally grow up and actually become professors and engineers themselves. We can't do this alone, we can't do this in a vacuum, but the help of engineers and the state to help us encourage these young people is something that we just can't live without.
You're going to see it get real fun here because you have to spin in circles along all those same axes. You ready? Yeah. We can take the cow and disable you can fly from wherever you want. So that's what I think I'm going to do on my side. That way it's a GCS area. I don't not mobile it like I usually am. You ready? Yep. 3, 2, 1.
I say go out and look and play football for a little while, and then come in and let's do some engineering activities and improve and help the world.
Well, we visited the Daisy Ranch, the Choctaw Nation's Daisy Ranch. They have that testing facility, and they're building that out. And so we're so proud of what they're doing and excited to see what they're doing in Oklahoma State University's Unmanned Systems Research Institute. Got to talk with all their kids that are so exciting and so thrilled to be working on the projects that they do, and they get to work with companies and agencies.
The state investment in education and innovation isn't limited to the classroom or campus. However, at Ardmore Regional Airport, one company is working hard digging trenches for the future of aviation ground handling.
The goal is carbonless taxiing by 2050. There's several of the EPA groups in the United States that have adopted that goal. I feel pretty confident the EPA or the FAA in the US will also adopt that goal, carbonless taxiing by 2050, and that's what we do. I mean, we pick the aircraft up at the runway, they enter into our system and they shut their engines off, and there's no more emissions. By towing them underground with an electric pull car that has 0 emissions, 80% of the commercial fleets out there are made up of either Boeing 737s or the Airbus A320s or some version of that. Those aircraft typically burn about 9 gallons of fuel per minute during taxi. The average taxi time in the United States is 16 to 27 minutes. It's something similar to that in Europe. These large airports can have upwards to 800,000 and 900,000 movements per year. So if you take that 9 gallons of fuel burn times 16 minutes of taxiing times 800,000 movement times $4 a gallon or whatever the going price is, the savings is tremendous, and it makes our ROI just tremendously short, within 2 years or less. If you notice, the straight sections are 2 different lengths, and that's on purpose because we change the direction of the aircraft as it comes in. So this is the shorter section of our pushback piece. So this is what we would actually install in an airport that just wanted pushback. But it does 2 things for us, and that's what we're hoping to test and to prove, is that we can do pushback at an airport. We can also do our ferry system, which is a point-to-point. So we could take an aircraft from like the terminal to a maintenance hangar, or to like Denver International's building runways, I believe it's 6 and 7, 3 miles away from the terminal, and the airlines are already complaining about, gosh, do I have to taxi that whole 3 miles just to get to the runway? We could put a ferry system from point to point and ferry those aircraft back and forth that 3 miles so they don't have to use their engines to move that 3 miles. The airlines put pressure onto the engine manufacturers to help reduce that fuel footprint, but until we start moving aircraft differently than we have for the last 100 years, it's not going to be fixed. And that's what we did, and that's why we came up with this idea was, don't move aircraft using their engines. We will shut those engines off and then pull them back and forth with an underground electric system.
As the COVID crisis closed in at the start of 2020, manufacturing was hit hard as staff stayed away from work, supply lines were disrupted, and conventional manufacturing was challenged. However, one Oklahoma company embraced the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, you have the what I call conventional machining, which is you know, manual equipment, and then you know, that moved to CNC, computer numeric controlled machines, and now we've kind of gone to the next level where we're using the advanced manufacturing techniques with utilizing the laser powder bed fusion, or also known as LPBF, metal additive manufacturing, utilizing the Velo 3D technology. You're not constrained by reality in your designs, and not limited by what a conventional machine or the CNC machine can do. You know, you get those geometries and are able to do, you know, kind of work freestyle. My wife Terry and I started the company in 2007 in our lean-to shed in our backyard, and we've grown to currently 15 acres, just shy of 100,000 square feet, I believe. It's hard to count now. 2012, I believe, is whenever we moved here, and bought a building, outgrew it. Bought the building next door, outgrew it. Built another building, we've outgrown it, and so now we're actually about to build another building to hopefully outgrow that.
Oklahoma's Native American communities have always played a part in the state's aviation industry. Aviation champion Will Rogers was born into the Cherokee Nation, and the tradition of innovation and commercial savvy within the tribes continues to this day.
Well, I'm involved in really two things. One is we're looking at technology opportunities, things that are economic opportunities for the tribe, job growth, industry growth, but we're also looking at emerging technologies, primarily transportation technologies, and how those will impact the tribe, how that will impact things that are on the horizon, how it's going to impact our quality of life for tribal members, our regional neighbors, and basically improve safety, road safety, things like that. So we're really looking out on the horizon for opportunities, but also things that will just change for us and that we adopt and will impact us. So I think we're going to start to see an acceleration of that activity. The way our regulatory system works right now, if there's a human still on board, there is an easier path to getting to some sort of regular operations. And so we'll probably see an acceleration over the next 5 years of electric propulsion. There are already many use cases that look very, very promising, both on the business side, you know, the financial return on investment, things like that. But as we start to see some of the first vehicles coming out of certification, where the FAA is going to allow them to fly, I think you'll see an acceleration of that. You know, I see just as many opportunities for rural areas as urban areas. Early on, we were calling the flying taxis, that's commonly referred to, we were calling that urban air mobility. That has changed now. We're calling it advanced air mobility, because we believe that just as many, if not more, opportunities in rural areas that have to deal with aging transportation infrastructure. And the example I like to use is within the Choctaw Nation Reservation, we have somewhere around 1,700 miles of state highways. Most of those are old, not up to where we would like them to support really the growth we've had. And so I think society, especially the United States, is long overdue for really a major transformation in how we adopt air transportation in aviation. And the neat thing that I like, coming from an engineering background, is that with electric propulsion, there's a potential not only for cost savings. We reduce the complexity of the vehicle, which reduces the number of parts, reduces the design cycle. There's a lot of things that happen because of that, but it also moves the reliability of these systems from what was an old mechanical kind of concept of reliability. We have a lot of moving parts, engines that wear out. We move to an electrical system reliability, which has the potential to really have a dramatic shift in our reliability of the systems. And so we're going to see systems that will become very quickly remarkably more safe, more reliable, potentially cheaper, and ultimately easier to accommodate and to utilize within our national airspace system.
Oklahoma has a rich history in America's space industry. An Oklahoman has been present as an astronaut in every stage of NASA's manned programs. Gordon Cooper in the Mercury series, Tom Stafford in Gemini and Apollo, Fred Hayes on Apollo 13 and the Shuttle atmospheric tests, and Stu Rosa on Apollo 14. Owen Grant and Shannon Lucid were amongst the state representatives through the Shuttle era, but it's Cooper's flight, during which time he described his ascent as like being inside the sky, which started this rich seam of spacefaring history for Oklahoma.
With Oklahoma being involved since the very beginning, with the spaceport here in the state, it gives us a wonderful chance to collaborate, to work together, to build on things for the future as that facility takes on more and more operations and so forth. And again, gives us a chance to tell a story of space in Oklahoma that will often surprise people. They don't expect it. So the spaceport brings another chapter to this already rich story.
I see space as like the lottery. If we get space out of OSIDA, we've hit the lottery. I'm going to keep buying that lottery ticket every single day.
Yep.
But I'm going to keep my day job too.
Yep.
We're standing in the Oklahomans in Space exhibit, and this is our newest large exhibit. And part of what's interesting about this is the way it came about, is that the history of Oklahoma and space and engineering and everything relating to space is much, much greater and much more deeply rooted than many people realize. The history of Oklahoma is the history of the space program. When you talk about scientists, engineers, astronauts, designers, fabricators, everything like that has come through the state, and it surprises people, the nature and extent of it. There's been Oklahomans involved in the space program since the very beginning, and that's part of the story that we tell here. We talk a little bit about some of the science and technology, but mostly it's about people. It's about the impact that Oklahoma has had on scientists, astronauts, engineers, all the people that make up the space program, and the values that Oklahoma instills in people that they express when they're working for NASA and other space agencies. So it's a very personal story, and again, it often manages to surprise people.
So we started the museum back in the late 90s. It started just as in the airport as a small little tribute to Tom Stafford, and it's grown now to over 63,000 square feet of artifacts, and big and small. Tom Stafford was a remarkable man. He went to the top of everything that he did. He was the captain of the football team when he was in high school here in Weatherford. He's super proud of that. He was honored to gain the Congressional Space Medal of Honor. He went to the top of just about everything that he did, which was the Naval Academy, the Air Force. He was a test pilot. He ended up being an astronaut. Then he was in charge of all of the astronauts. And then he went to Area 51. He's instrumental in the development of the stealth technology. So we have a stealth gallery that we're going to dedicate to the F-117 and the B-2. So yeah, there's just a lot. He's been involved in almost everything all the way up to today. He's 91 years old. He's still involved. He acts as an advisor on boards in important ways that we don't really understand too much. Like the national defense and things like that, he's all still involved in those kinds of things. And so they look to him as still a consultant and very much an advisor.
We're very, very fortunate. We are an affiliate of the Smithsonian Institution. And as such, we get to work with different Smithsonian museums, one of which is the National Air and Space Museum. And we've worked with them for about 20 years now. Initially, when we had an exhibit on Gemini 6 that was here, a spacecraft that was flown, piloted by General Tom Stafford out of Weatherford. The one that's behind me here is the CM-118, which was the last Apollo command module flown to Skylab, the U.S.'s first space station in the 1970s. And this is the real deal. This one was in space for 84 days. It held until just recently the record for the longest continuously flown spacecraft in space. It was up for over 84 days. And one of the things that also makes it interesting for us is that this was piloted by Bill Pogue, an Oklahoman. So again, you come back to the stories of Oklahomans and the space program and the fact that there were 3 manned missions to Skylab, and 2 of them were Oklahomans. That gives you an example, again, of the depth of Oklahomans' participation in the space program in every facet, in every phase, of participation that continues today. One of the things that we feel very fortunate about is that this is an essentially complete spacecraft. Many times when spacecraft flew, when they would come back, parts would be removed for either testing or reuse or a whole range of different reasons for it. This one, as the next to the last Apollo that flew, is essentially complete. So visitors get a chance to see the couches inside, the thruster controls, the control panels, everything that was part and parcel of the Apollo command modules. And the fact that even though this command module was tasked with going to Skylab, the space station, it's in many ways the same type of spacecraft as those which went to the moon. So we feel very lucky in being able to share a very complete spacecraft with the public.
We're always going to try to preserve the legacy, but our goal is to help encourage exploration, especially air and space exploration. You know, that's something that you can't carry on a legacy if you don't have people coming up behind you with the courage and the interest and excitement, curiosity, you know, all those things to push things forward especially in air and space exploration. Those are very dangerous fields. It's not something that's predictable. Things could go wrong, and I think it takes really special people to do something like that, especially guys like Tom Stafford and his crews of, you know, Geminis and Apollos. I mean, yeah, there's just so many of them back in the day that had that kind of courage, and for some reason that seems to be becoming lost. Well, my hopes for the museum is to continue the legacy of Tom Stafford and the people that he worked with that changed the way we did things in the 60s and 70s, but also to add to that, we have, you know, the new space technology coming in. Chris Hadfield, I watched a master class on him, and he was talking about how there's a landing pad at NASA now, which is not something that has ever been before. So all of these things are good advances in technology with our space and air technology, but it's a little bit, you know, always unknown whenever you're thinking about what could be. And so that's what we see right now, and it's kind of exciting, and hopefully we can incorporate some of that here.
Space is a long play, and it has many trials and many errors. And right now we're on the upswing of a space renaissance where it's been commercialized, and before it used to just be the government going to space and the government also being the customer and the supplier. And now we have companies, we have multiple entities involved in getting to space. The Oklahoma Space Authority represents Oklahoma in that space, that long space play. Commercializing space has opened up opportunity globally, but especially in Oklahoma. Hats off to the Oklahoma people for investing in the future. Yeah, so our NORDAM is a family-owned aerospace company. We're a global company. We manufacture components for business jets, from interiors and structures to reversers and nacelles to radomes. We manufacture for commercial airlines, from the only composite window frame to inlets for large aircraft. We support the military, and then we also have a large MRO, the only global independent maintenance repair organization in the world. So talking about taking care of our people, we've got to prepare the people that we're going to hire down the road. And we're all in this together in aerospace and in every industry. And part of that is a laser focus on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And I believe that kids can't be what they can't see. So we've got to let them see what engineering looks like. We've got to let them see what an astronaut can do, and not just the things in space. We got to let a person see what a hands-on aptitude for working on cars can be in aerospace and can be in, you know, the next level opportunity. So investing in STEM is essential to the future of I'd say, America and, you know, humanity. But right here in Oklahoma, we're doing that with the Oklahoma Space Authority by investing in education grants. And here in this facility in the Tulsa Air and Space Museum, we've given a grant to provide STEM programming focused on space.
You know, Oklahoma Air and Spaceport got its license in 2006, and the state of Oklahoma created the agency in 1999, and at that time there were only 2 entities putting anything into space at the time. That was the United States and Russia. And to have a spaceport that was a landlocked state in the middle of the United States was an anomaly. We stood out. But if you look at technology and where it's taking us today, these billionaires are putting together craft with boosters that come right back down to where they took off from. So the capability of an inland landlocked state to provide a spaceport is not unusual anymore. The technology has reached the point where this is a viable and continues to be a viable spaceport. We've got a 2,700-acre facility with an 1,100-acre industrial park adjacent to it. We have one of the 4th largest runway in North America. We have air traffic control. We have fire and rescue at our facility. It's a fenced-in, secured facility, and it's a general use airport. And so we're ahead of the game in many of those aspects, and having a spaceflight corridor makes us unique as well. The Air Force was stood up after World War II in 1948. A couple of years later, the Air Force came in and took the facility over. They're the ones that built the huge runway, and they turned it into a strategic air command base. And this is the alert center where the airmen would wait and serve their time for on alert. And they had 5 minutes to respond and get on their plane when the sirens went off for a test. And the B-52s would take off fully loaded with nuclear weapons on it. This is the 4th largest runway in North America. We are traveling down into one of the widest. The FAA has it marked at 200 feet, but the actuality is, if you'll see, the lights are over here on the grass, on the edges. And so we're actually 300 feet wide. It's fascinating. These are 3-foot thick walls with 2-inch steel doors. It's about 2,000 square feet of space in here. And this is where they would store their ordnance.
But funnily enough, despite the fact that under most circumstances this would be now a completely useless building, I mean, you can't, perhaps you can keep cattle in here, but you know, you're not going to set up an office in here. But funnily enough, somebody coming along with volatile materials for rocket launch or whatever, or you want to store a hot...
Absolutely.
Perfect.
Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, one of our tenants right now is a fireworks manufacturer.
Exactly.
But you know, it's a great storm cellar as well. But wow. I think the Highway Patrol will store some of their cars in here when they know that a storm is coming.
Wow.
But yeah, these are secure. I've got 5. 2 are currently leased. And wow. But yeah, this is a great asset for storage of fuel, whatever it may be. We have a general aviation airport runway and a spaceport license. So we're looking at everything aerospace and aviation. We've got a number of companies that are doing test flights on regular aircraft at our facility now, and we have some that are looking at unmanned and doing some testing with some unmanned vehicles as well. But we also have a spaceport license, so that makes us available for the next generation of flight. And Oklahoma is poised and ready and probably standing first in line in many of these aspects. You know, I point out the state of Oklahoma was a generation ahead of its time in 1999 when they created the Oklahoma Space Industry Development Authority. And again, at that time, there were only 2 entities putting anything into space. They were generation ahead of everybody else. We were the 6th licensed spaceport in the United States. And it's remarkable that they were thinking that far ahead. The backside of that comes is the states around us are starting to catch up and have even caught up and passed Oklahoma at this point. So we hope to make it a point with our policymakers and to those that can fund us to say that we want to catch up with our peer states. We want to be a top 10 state in aerospace and space.
I mean, there's tons of potential, and we were talking with somebody the other day, and you start with the Tom Stafford Museum right there in Weatherford and go straight to Burns Flat, and we can call that Oklahoma Spaceport, all that direction. How can we build all of that up from that whole corridor and make that a huge new space Oklahoma?
There you go. Yeah. The opportunities are endless. It's like a unpolished diamond. It's a diamond in the rough. It needs a little polishing, but it will sparkle eventually. I can promise you that.
20 seconds and counting. T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 12, 11, 10, 9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo 11. Tower cleared.
We got a roll program. Neil Armstrong reporting the roll and pitch program, which puts Apollo 11 on a proper heading.
Oh, they're doing well. I'm seeing CEOs. I'm seeing more engineers. See, that didn't happen in my time. Here, they told you to go to home ec to be an engineer as a girl. No, they would never say that now. But I'm just sorry that I didn't have that experience in my 20s, where I'd have made it. Anyway, I'm close with the NASA people, and then I was the first FAA inspector. People are doing it. I teach a lot of STEM. I lecture to a lot of high school kids. The kids today are getting phones and computers. They're learning quickly by that. Now, I'm sure they're getting into engineering. That's pretty normal. And I don't know how many are really getting that degree.
Ambition is what is the definition of space. It's the definition of being human. If we stop exploring, we stop being human. And if we stop, aiming our sights higher, further, and beyond, which is ambition, who would we be? I mean, we are Oklahoma. We've been through many things and getting to space. We've got many astronauts, and without ambition, drive, and courage, what else would we have out there? Just a big old runway. Inspiring and letting people know that you can be anything. I mean, that sounds cliche, but I tell a lot of people that Oklahoma has a spaceport. It brings a dream of going to space right here at home, and it kind of blows their mind.
Honey, I had such great, extraordinary feelings and knowing exactly what I wanted to do. I was never held back, only once. When NASA could not accept me, when Sally Ride and all the girls knew of my background and taking all the tests from Albuquerque, the astronaut tests, they said, "Wally, you got to be with us." I said, "Okay." I went to NASA because I had been there when all the girls went up, and I said, "I want to be an astronaut." They said, "Well, we want you. However, you're missing one thing on your resume, your engineering degree." I said, "Okay, I was at Dayton, I'll go over and get it." Well, I went to Dayton Engineering School, talked to the head man, and he taps me on the shoulder. He says, "You're a girl, go to home ec." That's the only time I've been said no to.
Is it everything you thought it would be? Here, look. Oliver. Move your head just a little. Oh, that's great! Can you move your head a little while in front? Oh, yeah. I love it! Oh, wow.
Youngsters, please get into engineering, get into sciences, go out to your airport and talk to a flight instructor that is connected to a college school. They are the least expensive. If you go to just a place where they teach flying, it's $200 and some an hour. You don't want that. I never paid anything more than $50 an hour. And today, it's about $70 an hour. So I want to encourage people, girls, but it has to come from the parents. Parents, please have your people, your kids, do what they want to do. Girls or boys, doesn't matter. I'm finding out a lot of the people, especially if they're in they're not Americans, they're finding that they're holding on to them.
This is different, isn't it? It's a little different. I cannot. Oh, wow. Josh, take a moment.
The aerospace world is in the midst of a revolution right now. Every day you hear something new about some new unmanned this or some autonomous that or this electric aircraft or this hybrid propulsion aircraft. You know, the military in and of itself is thinking about, you know, well, we might be staring at the last generation of manned fighters. We already have an unmanned tanker flying for the Navy. I believe KC-46, which was KC-X, is probably the last manned tanker for the Air Force. KC-Y will probably be unmanned. And then you start talking about, well, what does MRO look like for those vehicles? Well, for the fighter world, right now, the solutions that we're seeing being presented are quite literally disposable. At $20 million a copy, that's deemed disposable for the DoD. So then the question becomes, well, then what happens to Tinker if we start going to a lot of these unmanned platforms, especially if they're inexpensive? Well, Tinker's already thinking of that and ideating on how are they going to shift their value proposal, their way of doing business, and they quite frankly see themselves as an opportunity to repair what can be repaired and even maybe manufacture some of what needs to be produced to replace, which is a very interesting concept.
I do think it's important to also point out that our legislature has set up our state agencies and empowered and emboldened them
for success
to foster and encourage this industry.
Yeah.
This year in the 2022 legislative session, Tracy can talk about this, they passed commercial air service, and they also passed Senate Bill 1147, which actually empowers the State Department of Education to make aviation a core curriculum. So now it's not an elective.
Yep.
Now it counts as a credit. And I think that they're really trying to help us, both through monetary appropriations, but also just making it a more business-friendly environment. And I think that we owe our legislators a debt of gratitude for that.
Absolutely.
I agree.
100%.
They are no better than what they are today, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And we've got a good crop from the governor on down to the Senate and the House. Even our local leaders are all supportive and excited about aviation aerospace.
We've done a lot of monumental legislation that has become, model legislation.
Yeah.
Women in aviation, first in the nation to pass that in state statute, the recognition of women, the celebration of women towards that. And I think Senate Bill 1147, I'm not sure that there's another state that's been able to do that, to pass it as a core curriculum.
And we're so blessed in the state of Oklahoma that we have Tinker Air Force Base, the largest MRO facility in the entire country. I mean, it supports and sustains all of the Air Force's fleet around the country. And so very, very blessed to have them right here in our state. American Airlines, I met with their executives earlier. The largest MRO on the commercial side is fortunately to be located also in the great state of Oklahoma, up in Tulsa, with 5,000 or 6,000 employees there. Tinker's probably close to 30,000 employees. So great hubs in our state. We also have 5 military bases, 7 National Guard bases, and we're one of just 12 FAA licensed spaceports in the entire United States. The Oklahoma Aerospace and Industrial Complex. And ours is the only spaceport with a launch corridor trajectory towards the North Pole. So huge advantage for us. We are pushing in commerce to continue to develop that and look for other ways to bring in more businesses around that. We also have the FAA complex here. It's the largest in the country, the Mike Maroney Aeronautics Center, and of course the National Weather Center, located in my hometown of Norman, which is really cool.
Typically, we've got to step back and say, wait a minute, are you sure that's the Oklahoma standard? That you're thinking about all of us together? That you're not using hate and fear to get elected, or to sell a project, or to improve your own lot in life? Is this the Oklahoma standard of looking for the greatest good for the greatest number of people and trying to make it sustainable, not just for short-term gain, but long-term gain? That is part of who we are, and it's passed down to our children, and hopefully that'll be passed down to our grandchildren, just like the fact that so many of us had sharecropping families who survived those hard times, who learned how to get out of the cotton patch and go get a college education and get a job and serve their country during time of war, of surviving the tornadoes that have devastated our communities so many times over the years. of dealing with a very fickle climate that is now being affected even more with man-made climate change, of how to deal with the roller coaster of the oil and gas industry, the commodities of cotton and wheat. Well, this is a land of challenges, and we've all come from someplace else with very little shared memory. Events bring us together. They give us the shared memory that increases the number of dots that connect us into a community.
Thank you, Governor. Life is easy in state government when together as a pilot and those more than what I can you heard me talk about Senator Lucier earlier.
At least you can't eat popcorn while you're doing this.
Easy, easy.
She's trying to run away. Oh, I know what you're doing. Good job, Leash.
Oh, very clever.
Yeah.
This is like when Alicia
Look, I mean, we're just getting schooled now. She's putting on a clinic.
Yeah. This is very good.
The ACES program within the Oklahoma Department of Commerce and the Oklahoma Aeronautics Commission is pleased to bring Inside the Skies, an Oklahoma documentary about Oklahoma's aerospace and aviation industry. Grab your popcorn and sit in and enjoy.
Great.